small, quiet village nestled between green hills and muddy fields lived a young woman named Ayla. Her days were spent helping her aging mother gathering firewood and selling cassava cakes in the market. Life was hard, but Ayla never complained. Her eyes carried a sadness, but her smile never left her face. Ayla had nothing but her dignity. She wore the same faded blue dress every market day and tied her hair back with a fraying ribbon. People in the village called her the poor girl with the rich heart. She never asked for help. She only gave what little she had. One evening, her mother came home from visiting a distant relative in the neighboring town. She sat Ayla down and said carefully, "My daughter, a marriage proposal has come." Ayla was stunned. From whom? From a family in the city. They have a son. He's young, but he cannot walk. They say he is paralyzed. No one wants to marry him because of it. But they say he is kind. They will provide a small dowry to help us too. Ayla lowered her gaze. She didn't dream of a rich man or a grand life. She just hoped for someone who would treat her gently. After a long silence, Ayla replied softly, "If he is kind, that is enough for me." A few days later, a car arrived at the village, black and polished, a rare sight in a place where even bicycles were a luxury. From it came two people, an elderly woman and a man in his early 20s, seated in a wheelchair. His eyes were distant, his face calm and unreadable. He introduced himself as Eshan. The villagers watched from a distance. Some whispered cruelly, "He's crippled! She's marrying him for money! What kind of life will she have?" But Ayla did not hear them. She looked at Eshan and said politely, "Welcome to our village." Eshan simply nodded. Little did Ayla know, the man in the wheelchair, Eshan, was not who he seemed. He owned companies in the capital, had millions in investments, and was one of the youngest tech billionaires in the country. But he had chosen to hide his identity, tired of people chasing his wealth. And now, in front of him stood a poor village girl who agreed to marry him, not for his money, not for his status, but because she believed in kindness. He wondered silently, could she be real? The wedding was quiet. No fancy decorations, no orchestra, no silk gowns. Just a few chairs, a borrowed speaker, and the scent of fried noodles and jasmine flowers in the air. Ayla wore her mother's old lace kabaya, slightly altered to fit her frame. Eshan wore a simple white shirt and black slacks, his wheelchair polished to a shine. The guests whispered again, "She's too pretty for him. It will never last. Poor girl, her life is over." But Ayla remained calm. She had never expected a fairy tale, only peace. And so they were married. Eshan moved into a small rented house near the edge of the village. It had peeling paint, uneven floors, and a leaky roof. But Ayla kept it clean and warm. She cooked for him, spoke to him kindly, and treated him with respect, never once asking about his past or why he rarely spoke. Eshan observed everything quietly. He saw how Ayla woke early to sweep the porch. He saw how she helped the neighbors' children with their schoolwork. He saw how she fixed his torn sleeves by hand and never complained. One day, while Ayla was out, Eshan opened his laptop, a device he had kept hidden. He responded to a few urgent business emails, checked his company's stock price, and made $1 million decision in less than 5 minutes. But as he did, his mind wandered back to his wife. She never asked him for anything, not once, not even when it rained inside the kitchen. Not even when her only pair of shoes broke. She simply smiled and said, "We'll fix it soon, one day at a time." That night, Eshan asked her, "Why did you agree to marry me?" Ayla looked surprised. "Because you seemed gentle, and because my heart told me not to be afraid." "Even if I stay like this forever?" She nodded. "Even if, because I believe people are more than their bodies. And your eyes have pain, but not cruelty." That was the first night Eshan cried in silence, not from sadness, but from the shock of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. He knew then, Ayla didn't marry a billionaire. She married a man. Weeks turned into months. Ayla and Eshan settled into a quiet rhythm. Though they had little, Ayla's joy made the home feel full. She often sang while cooking. She talked to Eshan about the birds, the trees, the market gossip, and the stars. She laughed when the roof leaked again, using an old bucket to catch the rain like it was a game. Eshan began to change. He started speaking more. Slowly at first, then with warmth. He asked questions about her childhood. He listened when she spoke about her late father, about the time they couldn't afford rice, about the nights she and her mother shared a single boiled egg. But the more Eshan loved her, the heavier his secret became. Each night, he stared at the login screens of his bank accounts, the unopened emails from CEOs, the board members waiting for his return. His real life, the penthouse, the cars, the employees, felt like another world, a world Ayla didn't belong to, or so he thought. One morning, Ayla found a strange envelope under their bed. It was thick and elegant. Inside were documents, bank transactions, photos of a luxurious city office, and a Forbes magazine cover. It showed Eshan standing in a black suit, smiling. Eshan R. Malik, the silent tycoon. Ayla's hands trembled. When Eshan returned home that evening, she didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply sat with the envelope in her lap, eyes filled with confusion. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked softly. Eshan looked down, ashamed. "Because I wanted to know if someone could love me for me, not for what I have." Ayla didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, she whispered, "You could have told me the truth. I married a man with kindness, not money. But now you've made me feel like a stranger in my own marriage." That night, there was no laughter in the house, just silence, heavy and cold. For the first time, Ayla slept on the floor, curled up in her old shawl. And for the first time, Eshan realized that even the richest man in the world could still lose the most priceless thing of all, trust. The days that followed were quiet, but not the peaceful kind Ayla once knew. She did her chores in silence. She cooked, fetched water, and cared for Eshan, but without her usual warmth. Her eyes no longer danced when she looked at him. Her voice had no melody. Eshan, for the first time, felt truly poor. He had wealth beyond imagination, but none of it could buy back Ayla's trust. His mansion in the city meant nothing without the woman who had once made a broken house feel like a palace. One evening, he rolled his wheelchair to the edge of the rice fields where Ayla often sat alone at sunset. She didn't look at him, but he spoke anyway. "Before I met you, I had everything, but I was empty. People smiled at me, but they never saw me. They saw my wallet, my name, never my pain. I believed no one could love a man who had nothing to offer but a broken body. But you did. Without knowing anything, you gave me a home." He paused, the wind catching his breath. "But I was afraid that if I showed you my world, I would lose yours, that you'd see me differently. So I lied by hiding the truth." Finally, Ayla turned to him. Her eyes were still clouded, but soft. "I didn't need you to be poor or rich. I just needed you to be honest." He nodded, tears filling his eyes. "Then let me start again. Not as Eshan the billionaire, not as the man in the magazine, just Eshan, your husband." She didn't speak, but she didn't walk away either. That night, she returned to their small home. She laid her shawl beside his bed and said quietly, "One day at a time." And just like that, a crack of light returned to the darkness. The next morning, something extraordinary happened. Eshan stood, not fully, not steadily, but he rose, with trembling legs and clenched fists, using a walker he had secretly been training with for months during Ayla's trips to the market. Ayla saw him and gasped, "You're standing." He smiled faintly. "I told you I was broken, but I never said I'd stay that way." The news of Eshan standing, even briefly, spread through the village like wildfire. Some rejoiced, others doubted. But Ayla saw it differently. She didn't care about the miracle of him walking. She cared about why he stood, for her, for their life, for the future he wanted to rebuild with honesty. From that day on, their lives began to change, not in sudden wealth or fame, but in quiet, meaningful ways. Eshan no longer hid his identity. He brought Ayla with him to the city, not to show her his wealth, but to introduce her to the people who once only saw him as a number. Boardrooms stared in disbelief when they saw Ayla, a woman in simple clothes, soft-spoken, her hands still rough from village work, seated beside the founder of one of the most powerful tech firms in the country. When someone asked her at a company dinner, "How did you manage to win the heart of Eshan Malik?" she smiled and replied, "I didn't try to win anything, I just stayed." She didn't change much. Even in the city, she wore the same modest dresses, often cooked meals herself, and refused to live in the penthouse for more than a few weeks at a time. "Too high," she'd say. "I miss the smell of rain on soil." Eshan, too, changed. He donated more, built a foundation to support disabled children and poor women in rural communities. He named it the Ayla Hope Trust. Eventually, he walked without the walker, but he always said Ayla was the one who taught him how to stand. Years later, a journalist asked Ayla in an interview, "Do you believe you married a billionaire?" She laughed. "No, I married a man who happened to be one, but that's not the part that changed my life." "Then what did?" She looked at the camera, calm and steady. "He gave me something no one ever gave me before, a choice, and I gave him something money could never buy, belief."